and is muting everybody, we can begin. Well, this week, I hope everybody is doing well, that you're looking after yourself and staying safe. The virus is tricky. It knows when you've been good or bad, so be good for goodness sake. In any case, we are beginning a new book of the Torah, Bereishit. There's obviously so many things to say about Bereishit in the beginning. What I want to do today is I want to explore in some serious depth the most fascinating character, I believe, in Sefer Bereishit and maybe in the entire Torah. And that is the snake, the Nachash. And try to understand what the Nachash is all about, who the Nachash is, and what the Nachash, the snake, is doing in this story at all. You know, the first book of the Torah contains virtually no mitzvot. And so we are expected, what's the point of all of these stories? We are, Hashem, the Torah is presenting the lessons for life that we need to take with us even before we start to observe any of the mitzvot. And if we gloss over that and we don't understand what message is being sent to us, we've really wasted an opportunity. And I believe that the saga of the snake, the serpent, is one of the most important lessons, not only in the Torah, but in the life of each and every one of us. He's an unusual, I don't want to say he or she. It is the most unusual creature. And the snake plays a pivotal role here, but there's something we must need to be learning from the story of the snake and its seduction of Chava and Adam in the Garden of Eden. But in order to really understand the snake, we're going to have to turn our attention to the other place in the Torah where the snake is prominent. And that, of course, if I had you all in person here and unmuted, I would be quizzing you. But that, of course, takes place in Parshat Chukat. And perhaps that's an apropos place for the snake to be, because Chukat deals by its very name with the mysterious and the, in a sense, unknowable. And there we have the snake featured perhaps even more prominently than we do in Parshat Bereishit. Let's review the story of the snake in Parshat Chukat. The nation, it's a crucial moment in our history. We're traveling through the desert. We've been given all the trappings of a nation. We're on our way to Israel, but we're not going to make it, at least not in that generation. And the Torah tells us of the incident that takes place that involves the snake. Vatiktsar nefesh ha'am badarach. The introduction is, the soul of the nation was vexed on the way. Well, right here, we see that although we're going to be told that the nation is going to complain, ki ein lechem ve'ein mayim, there's no food or water here in the desert, and yet the introduction is cluing us in that it's not about material things. Because it says, Vatiktsar nefesh ha'am. There's some flaw in the nefesh, in the soul of the nation, that may be manifested or expressed in terms of physical needs, but there's something there that isn't physical, because it uses the word nefesh, and it says it twice. Because then it says, V'nafshenu katsa b'lechem haklokel. Our souls are vexed by this lechem haklokel. This is the slur they use against the man. The word haklokel connected to mikalkel, spoiling, because the man spoils after a day. And yet the man tasted like anything they wanted it to taste like. So it's very perplexing how this is a miracle food. I always tell people that if you want to know what the man is, the Torah tells us that as well in a kind of veiled way, because it says about it, Et asher tofu efu. It's a kind of primordial tofu that can taste like anything. You can use tofu to make ice cream, to hamburgers. It's a miracle food, a magical food, and yet their souls are vexed by it. Okay, so this is quite disturbing. Clearly, God sees a problem that needs to be fixed. Vayishalach Hashem ba'am et nechashim hasrafim. God sends out the fiery serpents. Vayinashchu et ha'am, and they bite the nation. It's interesting, by the way, just the use of words here, as you carefully examine the text. They bite the nation. Of course, they bite the people, but it doesn't say that. It would have been more correct to say, Vayinashchu, et anashim. They bite the nation. There's clues here all over the place. Vayamot amrav miYisrael, and many people die. They come to Moshe, the nation does, and says, Chatanu. We're, by the way, in Perek Chaf Aleph, in Chukat. They say to Moshe, Chatanu, we have sinned because we spoke against God and against you. Hitpalel el Hashem v'yaser me'aleinu et hanachash. Please, Moshe, pray to God and remove the nachash from our midst. Vayitpalel Moshe ba'adam. He does indeed pray for them. But he doesn't exactly get a positive answer. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, aseh lecha saraf, fashion a serpent, it's another word, right? Nachash saraf. V'simoto al nes, place it on a flagpole, place it on some kind of a standard. Vayakol anashuk v'ra'o tov v'chai. Whoever looks at it and sees it will live. Vayas Moshe nachash nechoshet. Moshe makes a nachash from copper, a copper serpent. Vayisimeu alanes, places it on the standard, and then v'haya, and it was im nashacha nachash et ish. If the serpents bit any people, now here notice it doesn't say ha'am, it says ish. If it bites a person, v'hi bit el nachash nechoshet v'chai. He will look up at this nachash nechoshet, this copper serpent, and he will live. And that's the story. It's a wild story, which begs so many questions. Why were the people Dafka attacked by snakes? They could have been scorpions. They could have been any manner of creature in the desert. Why or how did the copper snake protect the people? And isn't the snake a very negative image? Why should a flag be made? Oh, you can't share the screen. Thanks. If somebody's sharing the screen, don't do that. Okay. Sorry, I have to resize. Okay. All right, thank you. Good. Why would we use such a negative image to represent healing, even to this day? And you might ask, the people said to Moshe, remove the snakes. But God didn't do that. Why didn't Hashem remove the serpents rather than let them continue to bite and then provide an antidote? And then certainly the play on words, the snake, the name of the snake on the pole, Nachash Nechoshet, that must have some kind of deeper significance. So I want to try to make some sense of this bizarre episode that is so crucial to understanding a lot about life and certainly about the snake. The snake is the lowest of all creatures, figuratively and literally. It crawls on the ground and it resembles or in a sense, symbolizes one who is pathetic and lowly. One of the worst things we can say about a person, he's a snake in the grass. The snake in our story represents the low self-esteem of the people. The Sforno goes even further and says, the snake is not a snake, the snake is the Yetzer Hara in serpent form. Let's leave that for a moment. But here in our story, certainly the snake represents the low self-esteem of the people. And it's an understandable leftover from their years as slaves. They were the lowest man on the totem pole, on life's totem pole, so to speak. And when you have low self-esteem, the negative things in your life become exaggerated. And even the positive things that may occur in your life are downplayed. And you say to yourself, how can something good be happening to a low life like me? So you worship a golden calf because you have low self-esteem. You think you need a middleman, a conduit to connect to God, and that you cannot connect to Hashem yourself. Remember what the pasuk says in the story of the Egel Hazav? How does that story begin? Bayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe laredet min hahar. And the nation saw that Moshe had delayed coming down from the mountain with the 10 commandments. The truth is they got their dates wrong, their timing wrong, but the Torah obviously uses this unusual word boshesh that Moshe had delayed. You don't see this word anywhere else. The Torah is hitting you over the head with it and saying boshesh. It obviously connects to the word busha. They were embarrassed. They had low self-esteem. They did not believe that we can directly connect to Hashem. We have to have someone greater than us. We're not of that stature to be able to connect to God and then be our middleman. You argue against going into Israel in the story of the Meraglim because you don't think you're capable of winning the battle. You don't have that self-esteem. You don't have that self-confidence. And that's what they say in a very subtle but clear way. These Meraglim who lose faith in themselves, who don't have faith in themselves. And they say about the other nations they saw, Efes ki azam. They didn't have to use the word Efes. The word Efes, and it's used in our vernacular, means a nobody, a nothing. You're an Efes. Do you ever hear people insult someone else in Israel by saying, you're an Efes, you're a zero, you're a nothing? But that's what they thought about themselves, and they say it clearly. We were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so that's the way we appear to them. If you think of yourself as an Efes, as a grasshopper, as a nothing, then that's how other people will view you. You express that psychologically, transmit that message to them. And you even reject the mun because you doubt if you're worthy of such a miraculous gift. What is the cure for this kind of low self-esteem that plagues us throughout our history when we somehow lose faith in ourselves? The cure is to raise our vision, to walk with our head held high, to inject a healthy dose of self-respect into ourselves and appreciate that we are God's greatest creation. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. For me, this world was created. If you proclaim that, then you're on the way back to recovery and you glance heavenward. You don't destroy the snake because that will only mask the problem and delay the cure. Instead, you raise that snake up and you force people to look at it, to face their fears and to confront their self-doubt and to conquer them. And thus we have this phrase, the Nachash HaNechoshet. It's not just a play on words. There's a deep message in it. The disease contains the cure within itself. And that's why we retain the snake, but we change the message that it's sending to us. We put the snake at the top and we force people to look up and to understand that our help comes from Hashem. It's like the flu virus, right? We're all now supposed to be getting our flu shot. But the way that we'll do that is by injecting some of the virus into ourselves in order to create the antibodies and cure the disease. And therefore, we use the snake, Nachash Nechoshet. It's going to provide the antidote. And so we're able to put that snake at the top of this banner. And by looking at it, reminding us that if we have faith in Hashem, if we connect to Hashem, and that's always indicated in an upwards fashion, then we're going to be able to banish this self-doubt and this lack of self-esteem, and we're going to be able to create miracles in our midst and accomplish all the things that Hashem told us we can do. A similar principle, by the way, just to inject for a moment, is the idea of the machatzit shekel, that everybody has to contribute and give half a shekel for the maintenance of the Beit HaMikdash. And the pasuk says, because, everybody's looking for a break. I'm a privileged character. I'm not in position to give money. I should get an exemption. And the Torah says, no, hadal lo yamit. The poor person cannot give less. Even the poor have to give. Why? Because unfortunately, in the world since the beginning of time, we judge someone's importance financially by money. And the fact that somebody can give even a half a shekel, and especially when nobody can give more, because ha'ashir, the rich person, cannot add to it. So that person is saying, I'm a somebody. I'm not a taker. I'm a giver. I have money. And that's why the Torah introduces the idea of giving a half shekel with the unusual phrase, ki tisa et rosh b'nei Yisrael. When you count the people, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say ki tispor et b'nei Yisrael. It says when you lift the head of the Jewish people. And that's the idea. When you can give, when you can take that money and be on an even par with the richest person in the nation, you can lift your head up high and you can say, I count. I am somebody and I am contributing just like everybody else. If you take that away from someone and don't let them contribute, then in a sense, they don't count. And that's what it says quite literally. When you raise up the head of somebody, that's how to count them, and that's how they're counted. And that only occurs when they give that half shekel. Well, now we can return to the story in Bereishit of the snake. The snake represents actually both extremes. In Chukat, we see the snake, and you see it there too. First, the snake is the low self-esteem, and then the snake on the banner is the high self-esteem. But here in the story of Bereishit, you see also this dichotomy. The snake is unusual in that the original snake, say Chazal, walked on two legs. It was tall. It was a creature that stood upright like man. One of the greatnesses and one of the most important distinctions between man and beast is that beasts are on all fours, say Chazal. Man is the only creation that stands fully upright and goes through life upright. Why? Because when you are upright and you don't course, it can be a metaphor that you're yashar, honest, but also you stand tall, you see further because you're taller in a very physical way. And therefore, that indicates you have vision. Man is different from beast because we are able to see ahead and we can understand what's coming. We can use our intelligence in order to anticipate and react and plan for the future. That's what makes man so much greater than the animal kingdom. That's why, what does Pirkei Avot say? Mi hachacham haroed hanolad. The one who can see that which is to come. But because you're tall, you can see further. You stand above. And therefore, you have a better idea of what's coming. The snake initially was like that. The snake was very, as we'll see mention in a moment, very smart, very clever, and stood upright. And by the way, also spoke to God. You know, there's only 2 non-human creatures in the Torah that speak to God, right? I don't know if you know that. If I was talking to you, you'd know the 2. But one of them is the snake. The other is, you can say it, I'll see you, even though you're muted. What's the other creature? The other creature is the fish in the story of Yonah. And I don't want to go into the reason for that now. A lot of people say the donkey, but that's wrong. God doesn't speak to the donkey. But God speaks to the fish, and God speaks to the snake. And that's another indication of the snake's initial greatness. Standing tall, on 2 legs, upright, speaking to God. And, you know, the pasuk says, and you read this every year, but do you ever stop to examine it? It says, and it's one pasuk after the other. In Parak Bet, the last pasuk, Parak Gimel, the first, Vayu shnehem arumim, ha'adam v'ishto v'lo yitboshashu. They were naked, they were arumim, and they were not embarrassed. And the next pasuk, V'hanachash haya arum mikol chayat hasadeh, asher asa Hashem Elokim. It's the same word. Now, the Ibn Ezra, I have to admit, the Ibn Ezra says, don't get confused. They're 2 different words. By Adam and Chava, it means they're naked. By the snake, it means he is, hard to say, arum. He's not naked, but he's clever, he's subtle, he's smart. I want to suggest to you that, with all the respect to the Ibn Ezra, you have the same word used 2 psukim in a row. And I suggest that the word means in both cases smart, because the snake is appealing to the smarts, the sense of ego, the greatness of man, of Adam and Chava. Remember, they're the last things created. By the way, it appears that the snake was created last of all the creatures, and human beings last of all. And remember, as the Torah, as we're clearly taught, the later in creation you come, the greater the creature you are, right? You're the more advanced in every way as you come further into creation. So the snake is close, and then comes Adam and Chava. And so now the snake is appealing, not necessarily focusing on low self-esteem, but high self-esteem. And that's why it says here the same word about Adam and Chava, lo yitbosheshu. Whereas in the story of the golden calf, this nation saw ki boshesh Moshe l'redet minam. They were embarrassed, but here below yitbosheshu, they're not embarrassed. They don't have a sense of shame. They're smart. And so the snake, and as the Sforno says, the Yetzer Hara, he's going a bit the other way. And he's appealing to their sense of ego and basically saying to them, you are the ultimate creation. You have no limits. Nothing should be denied you. Eat the fruit. Okay, you were told not to, but you're absolutely entitled. You know, it's extreme entitlement. You're the greatest creation ever made. You want to do something, you can do it. Flex your muscles. Don't let yourself be pushed around. That's what the snake is appealing to here as well. It's not, and maybe it is a sense of saying to them, don't have low self-esteem. Have the highest of esteem about yourself, because you can do anything. And that's why the punishments given out are mida keneged mida. Chava is given pain in childbirth like an animal, suffers the same kind of pain that an animal would suffer. With all our sophistication today, how far have we come? We still can't make childbirth painless. It's still something that a woman, most women, I assume, will somewhat dread, because with all of our sophistication, Chava is still going to have to suffer that pain. She's not, as the snake tried to intimate, capable of anything and everything. Adam is the same way. He's going to have to work for a living. He's going to have to sweat. Kates v'dardar. He's going to have to worry about his future sustenance. And he's going to lose some of that privilege he had, that white privilege, you might say, in Gan Eden. He can no longer expect that everything will be handed to him, because as great a creature and creation that he is, he's still got to answer to a higher authority. And this is how he learns to do that I no longer can have everything just handed to me. And the snake, of course, he's going to be made from this upright, standing creature to the lowest of all things, slithering in the grass, no longer able to look down at any other creature. Everyone will literally look down at him. The bottom line to all this, and the sum up, the story of the snake, which is really just an amazing lesson for us, is that we need self-esteem. We have to have self-esteem. Without it, we degrade ourselves and we will never realize our truest potential. You know, I've, over the years, sometimes traveled with some great chazanim. I had the occasion to do a cruise with Cantor Motzkin. He's one of the great chazanim. And when we were kidding around with each other, at some point, you know, I was kidding about the elevated ego of the chazanim. I told that famous story that we all know about the guy who comes to town to see his friend, the chazan, and he goes up to people and says, do you know chazan so-and-so? And the person just walks away. The next person spits on the ground. Somebody else just curses out every time he mentions his name. Finally, he finds the chazan and he says, you know, I've gone up to a number of people, you know, and I get a kind of a crazy reaction. And I'm wondering, why do you stay in this town? And he says, for the kavod, for the honor. So I'm kidding around with telling these stories to Cantor Motzkin. And, you know, he said something to me, all kidding aside, he said, yes, it's true that I have somewhat of an elevated ego, but I want to tell you that if you don't have a decent sized ego, you really can't get up in front of 5,000 people that I've done on more than one occasion and put on a performance. You have to have a pretty good opinion of yourself. Maybe after the concert, you should be humble, but to prepare yourself and be at that concert, you have to have a great deal of confidence in yourself. And that's certainly true. But at the same time, this story is telling us, don't overdo it. Remember that as great as we are, there's something greater than us. And as important as it is to have self-esteem, it doesn't mean that we can ascribe every success to ourselves. In the famous words in Parshat Eikev, don't say, Kochi va'otzem yadi asali et hachayil hazeh. It's my strength and the greatness of my hand that has enabled me to accomplish this. You have to balance that. And the snake in both stories is coming to teach us that lesson. When your self-esteem is too low, then you will never be able to live up to the expectations that Hashem has of you, because those are high expectations, and you better have a very solid and very healthy view of who you are and your potential and your strengths and your abilities. But at the same time, you cannot let that go to your head to believe that I am completely in charge here. I can do whatever I want. I am the final say. You're not. You look up and you recognize, you look to the skies, to the heavens, and you recognize that the final say, that the ultimate decision is coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you don't latch on to that and connect to that, then at the end of the day, you will have missed the message. So right in the beginning of the Torah, slithers in the snake to teach us something that will follow us and will be necessary for us to know throughout the Torah, but throughout all of our lives as well. And that's why I suggest that one of the first lessons that we're being taught here with the snake, as we open the Torah, is the concept of self-esteem and self-confidence, but the limits that that has to have so that we retain a healthy faith and connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Armed with both of those, there's nothing that can ever stop us, that will achieve all the blessings and everything that Hashem promises that we'll do. So I wish you all, we can talk for a minute or two. We can actually stop recording, but everything that we've seen here, hopefully